Welcome to the Awesome Black Dad Show, where our goal is to give life to the stories of fathers in a way that encourages and empowers dads to become a better version of themselves. This episode kicks off conversations about relationships, love, and the men and women that come together to make the best of it. As fathers, we are always told a man should provide and protect. And as men, we are taught to hunt. You set them up and I'll knock them down, bro. Unfortunately, hunting is an emotionless game of cat and mouse. And once that cat has the mouse, the games really truly begin, causing a number of issues amongst men and women. The goal this month is simple. Encourage fathers to not just have conversations about relationships, love, and family, but to be more deliberate in our pursuit of becoming better at loving the women that we have chosen to bear our children. In today's episode, we talked to Dave and Dana Maxx, a Renaissance couple that met through the power of dancing, and now they want to share that same power with the rest of the world. Dave is a highly regarded dance instructor that through dance teaches the importance of communication and roles to sustain a healthy, balanced relationship. His wife Dana is a classically trained dancer that brings the balance to their relationship. Together they are creating the Build Real Relationships platform designed to help singles and couples understand what it truly means to be in a successful relationship. We will get into roles, love, fatherhood, the black man versus the black woman, and their first project, the 2-Minute Love Affair. Lastly, but certainly not least, my lovely wife Lakeisha is joining us as a co-host, primarily to keep me honest. But without further ado, let's get into it.
So there's the perfect segue to that is that there's recently been, and Dave, you were talking about head of household and what that means, and we've kind of talked about that throughout this whole conversation. There's a video going around about with Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin, right? And I don't know, have you guys had an opportunity to see that snippet? Yeah. And so I would really like to hear what all of you thought about what it was that Nikki Giovanni was trying to articulate to James Baldwin about black men specifically in relationships with their women and children.
All right, before we go to that, I need to go back to the we got married in 2012 thing. One of the things that was important to both of us was that we were at that time we were ready to move in, but it wasn't enough time to have a wedding and all of that other stuff. And I've had this big thing with image and perception and interpretation in the whole 9 yards because I have 2 daughters. And so it was important for me to create an example that certain things worked, certain things didn't, certain things were okay, certain things weren't. Not to say that you was going to hell if you did things a certain way, as opposed to sometimes it's important to address the small issues, so to speak, because they're important. I think a lot of times, especially in today's world, we get caught up on, well, that ain't really a big deal, when really the details matter, right? And so I didn't want to just move in with Dana. I didn't want Dana to just move in with me. And so I've always had this thing where if you live with me or if I have children with you, you are my wife, right? And so I knew that we weren't getting married till June, but I just didn't want to be in a situation where, all right, we just together and then in June we gonna get married. Yeah, that too.
They shooting. So I don't want to take this down another path, but I think I really want to mention this because it's interesting. When you talk about that and you go and how things kind of go in a circle, right? So you originally were saying when you were talking about your father, you were talking about how some conversations you wish you would have had, but you couldn't have because of the barriers of religion and the constructs of religion. But what you did with Dana was based on a religious construct.
Yes.
Yes.
And
right?
appearance.
Yeah. Appearance.
But it more than more.
But that appearance is still based and rooted
Yes.
in a religious construct that we're taught. No shacking up.
No. But on top of that, more than that, it was, and then I have to give this to my mother rather than my father, was a certain respect that I owed that woman. Right.
But that wouldn't that also depend on what Dana's principles are? Because what if she didn't feel disrespected?
But I knew
that's more than in this conversation.
Yes
I don't
know. And
that is accurate. That wasn't
a big thing for you.
No, for her it wasn't a big thing.
Right.
But I knew Dana wanted to be a wife,
which you were still going to make. You were not trying to.
No, I wasn't trying to. I wasn't going to trying to circumvent that, but I realized what her desires were, right? And as a result, a lot of times we as men take what women allow us to take, or we give them what they allow us to give them. Okay, and so for me, it was necessary for me to prove my place by saying, I don't just want to be in this place. I want to be what you said you want.
I think the other really key thing to this too, Terrell, is the reality is that Dave and I dated. We got engaged. We planned a wedding and we broke up. And then we got back together.
See, here you go again with the, I'm hearing I'm hearing something else. Here you go again.
So I think that's key, because for him, it was like.
So you broke up. There was a time period in between before you got back together and did it
2
again.
2 years.
2 years. Okay. Took a break, came back, got engaged again.
You know what though? In our situation, I don't think it was more so taking a break. Because it wasn't breaking up to come back.
Right, sure. You was just like, I'm done with you, and it's not going to work out. That's fine, and that's fair. But even, screw you, Nick. See you when I see you. I didn't like that song you danced to the last night, so we can't do this. But I think it's still interesting. I mean, no matter how you kind of try to spin it, we're still having a conversation about your feelings in that. And I get that you wanted the perception to be, because probably outside looking in, people are going to think about that shacking up from a woman's perspective more so than a man, right? So I can understand you think to some degree you're wrapping that in the protection of the woman you're about to marry
and his two daughters.
Well, and your two daughters.
More than anything else, it was about the example that I was setting.
Right.
Beyond religion, it was, I need you to understand that your dad respected this woman, right? And since we learned by observation.
Right, but those examples and that perception is all rooted. I don't know anywhere else. It's all rooted. We've been taught and trained that's what gives a woman a level of respect. The shacking up comes from, and I don't know the scriptures in the Bible, but I'm sure that there's a scripture in the Bible that says something to the effect like, no shacking up, that type of deal. So even to say that you were doing that, and it's a respectable thing. I'm not challenging that in any way. I get you. Right? It's just interesting that the thing that you wish wasn't, the barrier that you wish wasn't there for you and your dad to be able to break through at that time, you created, you followed the same barrier to some degree in the decisions that you made for the family that you were trying to build. And it's interesting how things come, like the things that we hate so much, right? So, kind of like with my father, right? I hated that he wasn't there. Hated him for not being there. And the more hate I had for that situation, the closer I got to him. To being the things that I didn't like about him, even though I didn't necessarily know the things that I have conversations with my mom about. And so when I became more acceptable of some of those things, traits that I took, things that I didn't like, the closer I got to my truth and my reality and understood what it is that I wanted to present to people, irregardless of what I was taught, what I learned. Like if I didn't want to shack, then I don't want to shack based on the things that I was taught and so forth and so on. I just thought it was interesting how that worked for you.
Yeah, for me, I think it was being in a place where I've always had this opinion, right? Well, not always, but since I've been an adult, that we talk about women not knowing what they want, right? How we started the conversation. And that at some point, right, one of the rhetorical responses to that we hear from men was she let me do it? Or was she agreed to it? Or she said, okay. So she grown, we both grown, right? I think at some point we as men have to take responsibility for the positions that we often push women into, knowing full well they rather do it another way. Right.
But I think that the average person, to be like, I understood your position. Mm-hmm. It did not bother me because I was engaged to be your wife. I wasn't just your girlfriend. To me, that made a difference. You didn't ask me for us to move in together. And I think for most people, they would have said, okay, they're preparing to become one, and it makes financial sense and a lot, for them to move together. They're saving for a wedding, you know what I mean? So I agree with you. I think that it definitely, because if you fast forward, at the end of the day, our children are going to make decisions. True. That go outside of what you would have hoped for. And when you talk about wanting our parents, sometimes, and I'm not saying that I disagree with the whole leading by example. I do think it's important. But I also think that conversations are very important with our children. So not that they don't see things, but it's almost to me more important that you're having open conversations with them about decisions that are being made and why things are the way that they are. More so this stance of I'm gonna do it in hopes that this is what they take from it, because you can have every hope, your intention can be good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your children are gonna get from it.
Right, and then the other point that I really would like to make, for me, it was I felt and still feel to this day that I needed to live with the woman before I decided that I was going to marry her. Well, I shouldn't say decided. I had the idea that this is somebody that I'm thinking about spending the rest of my life with. Mm-hmm. I'm not exactly sure. There's some things that I understand that living with her will bring out, and I'd have to be accepting of those things, or we can break away. And so I never really thought of it being, of that train of thought being disrespectful to myself or to my wife. I actually thought it to be the very opposite, right? Because I could have said, I want to marry you, get into this marriage, move in together, and all hell breaks loose. And all hell still breaks loose at some point. So there's some shakiness in there, but my idea of that is still that, you kind of, as the old folks would say, you kind of drive the car before you buy it kind of deal.
But that's something that we had a lengthy conversation about, because he felt that way and I felt the total opposite, because growing up, even though my parents were divorced, I still had this feeling like I'm not shacking up with anybody. Right. Like, no, we're not going to do that, but, we talked about it. I understood some of the reasons why he felt that way. And in my mind, maybe I was a little bit naive or just like, but I didn't feel like, I felt like the way that our relationship was going, that it was going in that direction. Like, not that he was going to propose tomorrow, but I was like, this is somebody that I trust and that, I want to be with. So that's how we came to an agreement to do it. But we were like polar opposites on it, because he felt that way. And I was like, yeah, no, we don't do that. Like, for instance, like even when I introduced him to my family, in Louisiana, my grandparents' house, when we took somebody home, the guys literally stayed in a separate house. So the girls were in this house, the guys slept over there. We were not allowed to.
They ain't allowed in the hen house.
We were not allowed to be in to sleep in the same room until you were married.
Right.
I mean, at my house now, my daughter's an adult. Her boyfriend can come over, but you got to go home.
Correct. Even if you know, like we're not stupid, right? So we understand like what goes down.
I know what happened.
Right. But it's
but it
like
ain't gonna happen.
Correct. But it's like right. So it's like when we went home to, my parents' house or to my grandparents' house, it was like, okay, see you later. Like you're in that house and I'm over here, or we're in separate rooms. Even when we lived together, even after we lived together, when we went home to my grandparents' house, he stayed in one house, I stayed in a separate house.
Yeah. You don't get to be with the chickens.
Right.
Ain't no big piece of the chicken over here.
So we completely, we got all off target.
Yeah. They took it down a whole nother path.
But now let's go to
Right.
So the nigga Jim
right. So.
Oh, right. I forgot. We didn't talk about that.
Yeah. So what do you guys think in terms of what Nikki was trying to say as it pertains to black men and the black relationship and household at the time?
I think, the first part that I remember is that Nikki Giovanni was talking to James Baldwin about the fact that basically when a black man comes home, we as women, we get, I don't want to say the bad part, but that's kind of like, it is what it is, right? So she was saying in that, like, you go to work and you smile in your supervisor's face and you put on this front for him and life is all, rainbows and butterflies at work. But then when you come home, I catch hell because the face comes off. I'm getting this. And so she was saying, why can't I get a break from that? And why can't you give me what you give him? And so in that, I understood exactly what she was saying because I feel like a lot of that happens today, that we all have to put on this face when we go to work where it's like, oh, you're so nice. And people tell me that I'm so patient. They say, you're the most patient person. And I'm like, you have no idea. Because when I come home, my husband, he gets it. Like he gets that real raw emotion. So I understood what she was saying because everybody needs a break from that, right? Like, even if that is the raw emotion, like I need a break. I need to have, even if it is faking it, give me a break in that. I get that. Like you can't just keep unloading on somebody all the time. That wears them down.
Yeah.
And it's like we hurt the people that we love the most because we feel safe in that, in expressing that emotion.
Right. I agree. And I think Dave and I talked a little bit about it last night. And what I was saying to him is that I felt like essentially she was saying, make an effort. Make an effort because, yes, I understand. And I think a lot of times what happens is we're selfish. It's like, I worked really hard today. Today was just not a good day. I'm home. I'm irritated. And listen, stay out my way. Right. But we talk about home being our peace. And so the reality of it is if you're here, but you're nasty, that also affects the peace.
Correct.
So make an effort. So if that means you need to go sit in the basement, in the bathroom or whatever,
or in the car
for 30 minutes to an hour, then please do that. But don't just expect that your spouse should be okay with you being nasty, especially when you have little people, because we talk about all the times, people don't give children enough credit.
They pick up on it.
They pick up on everything. And when you talk to people as adults, how often do you hear them say, I thought it was me? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine how horrible that would feel if in 10 or 15 years your son said to you, dang, Dad, I thought it was me? Because that's me. Like, I remember my mother, she would come home from work. She would barely say hello. She would not take her coat off. She would go straight into the kitchen. She would cook dinner and she would retreat to her room. And that was it. As a child, I didn't understand that. As an adult, I understand she worked a job she was unhappy with. Her marriage wasn't the best. You know what I mean? It's like she was tired. But the child me did not understand that.
You didn't know how to process that.
Right. Mm-hmm. So an effort has to be made. We have to find a way. And listen, we're all human, so we're not going to always get it. We're going to have some days where we miss it. But to me, my biggest takeaway was simply make the effort. Dave and I have a thing with his occupation. I realized that on any given day, he can see something that most people will maybe not ever see in their life, right? So when he comes home from work, we greet each other, but I really don't talk to him for about the first hour. I allow him to decompress. And then when he comes down or whatever, whether he spent his hour in the bathroom or in his office or whatever, because that's a thing.
Right.
You know,
What you doing in there?
I hate you. I hate you.
you know, we come together, and it doesn't bother me, you know, because I know that he needs it.
Is that a conversation you had, or is that something that you kind of gleaned from your interactions with each other?
I think that
After the reality of realizing how unreal it was, and
When you say unreal, what do you mean? Like understanding what your day looked like, having a conversation with her,
what it might possibly look like,
and it wasn't just
and not necessarily. It's one thing to think you know what it is. It's another thing to hear it and be like, "Oh wow, this is real."
But honestly, your occupation had a lot to do with it, but you could have been a mailman and I still would have got it, simply because I understand it. I'm a woman, and I knew what it was like to go to work, and, you know, I work from home now, but I understood you sitting in traffic and, you know, like all these different, you went to work. So I got it. So I wanted some time to myself too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was all of that. It wasn't an official conversation that said this is our thing. Yeah. It just kind of happened organically.
I think the thing is that with men, especially back during that time, is that I think where the Black community failed us is that there was no communication, right? I think that that's one of the things that, like, our generation now, we're so big on collecting information and trying to figure out what happened and why did that happen.
Understandable.
But I think that back then, you know, like,
it just was what it was.
It was what it was. Like
because
you say,
even if you listen to the conversation, in much of the conversation, James would be like, I mean, but you have to, this is what it is.
Right.
This is what I'm he would be like, no, you're absolutely right.
Right.
But get over it.
Yeah. Right. But I think a big part of that was, don't you see what's happening to me on a regular basis? Right. And if we go back to the house cleaning or what a woman's responsibilities are in a household, or possibly could be, the perspectives are different because we're experiencing them at different times in different ways. And so a lot of times you have to articulate what is possible. Yeah. You know what I mean?
But I think that to some degree I think that, again, a lot of times we're selfish because we look at our day and we say, my day was hard. You sit in the office all day. And it's like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Like if you work for somebody, you likely have some degree of stress at work. So it's unfair for us to sort of have a hierarchy. Well, you know, your day was probably more stressful than hers, so she should just deal with whatever. No. We're human and we all have needs. So it's just, we can't be selfish about it. It is, we both experience something. We both, maybe not the same thing, but we still have a general need from each other.
So the thing that I took away from it's a couple of things. First, I think that the most powerful thing is that, that should happen, is that there needs to be a space to have those conversations, right? Comfortably. I'm not attacking you about your job and what you do and whether or not how hard you work. If you go anywhere for 8 hours and do a particular thing for a lengthy amount of time over some years, there's an opportunity for you to walk through the door and want to throw your favorite glass against the wall.
Absolutely.
Right? So, and then when you think about the era that they were in, that time period for a Black man was really, really tough. And more importantly, he was the single provider for that household. Right. So all of that, when you think back to the movie Fences and him having to go to work and be a garbage man. Right. And then the pressure of not being able to give his wife some of the things that he know that she wants and he can't do it. Yeah. Right. And she can't go out and get a job because she ain't going. That's a time when she's not going to even get hired. Yeah. And then they're trying to raise a kid and that kid suffers from that relationship. And then not just from seeing it, but from the lack of even having the words to put to that relationship and what's going on there. And so it's very interesting because I talked to Keisha a lot about, I think I explained to her, and I don't think she realized at the time before I explained it, I recognized that she worked in a male-dominated industry, and I understood that she has to put on this cloak, right? She has to be a certain way to be successful in that industry, right? And so when she walks through the door and she's still wearing this cloak, you have to understand that you just walked into our home. And so you have to understand, right? So you have to understand when you walk in, some of those things that you bring in from outside are disrespectful to what's going on in this household. And I will give you some level of grace to that because I understand what you're doing outside also helps keep the lights on in the house and so forth and so on. Now, I'm not stupid about that, but we got to have a conversation about how much of that you're doing, because it's going to impact me in a way where I shut down. If I cut the switch off, it's like, and what happened?
We had that exact same conversation.
So, yeah.
You know, and I think one of the things that happens is we get caught up in the whole idea of these roles. And I'm a roles person. I think roles are important. But I also understand that the dynamics of those roles over the different eras and generations has changed somewhat. And so there's some adjustments that we have to make to understand our place in those roles. Yeah. And for what they were describing, I think for that particular era, I understand the whole idea of lie to me, you know, or play the role for me just to show me that you care.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it can get problematic when you think about think about what she says. Come home, lie to me. I don't care about what the truth is. I just want you to present yourself in a way where I can be comfortable and get to the next day.
Exactly.
And so when you say that, men, with all the stress that we don't know how to articulate and get it out of our system, comes out in other ways. We run into our caves and we do these other things. So, you know, if you give me the permission to lie to you,
that's
I don't think,
but for men, that's a real gray area.
Yes, it is,
because we don't categorize. Yeah. So when you give me that leeway, you're opening up Pandora's box,
right?
Because it ain't just for this category,
right? Because most men will
4 or 5 different categories.
Because most men will say, or when a man is cheating and the woman finds out, the first thing they say is, why didn't you tell me? Or why did you lie to me? You've been lying to me. And the man says, well, I lied to you to protect you.
Man.
And there's it seems like a cop-out.
But it's not.
But there's truth in that. Because
for sure.
In general, I would think that the guy is in a place where he loves and cares for you. He's made a mistake. Right? I'm not saying serial dudes that go out here and just smash anything. But a guy that's genuinely probably made a mistake, and maybe even a girl, but from a guy's perspective, that's genuinely made a mistake, and he comes back and he says, I didn't tell you, 1, because I'm ashamed, and then 2, obviously, because I want to protect you from that. So that is me, obviously, lying to you about a particular thing because I don't want to hurt you in that way. And if I can keep it to myself, now it's a cop-out, don't get me wrong, but that still, it gets really gray when she says, lie to me. I don't care what the truth, because she says, what does the truth matter? I don't need that. We're trying to do, because she was focused on, in that era, she's focused on raising a kid in a way that he can grow up and be better than what they were. True. Right? So don't give me no lies, because we got to get to the next day.
Exactly.
I think that she meant that figuratively.
Exactly.
Because it's like, I don't want you to lie to me, but she's saying...
But not in that era.
But men don't do figuratively.
Well, I mean, we know. That's why communication is key, because it's like black and white. But for her, it's like... If you come home and it's like hell every day, and I'm trying to sustain this household, we got a kid here. Yeah, I need a break. This will not work. Lie to me. Give me a piece of that sunshine that you giving that man at that job. I think that's what she was saying. Not like lie to me, but like... give me a break.
But you know what?
She wasn't just talking about the job. That a man can leave that job, go to the bar, and deal with the same thing he's in that era for sure, and deal with the same thing he was dealing. Walking the streets, walking home, he would have to endure probably more than he endured at that job.
But I still feel like figurative, because listen, okay, so if I'm your person, I am your spouse, like. This is your safe zone. So, but in order for you, so you can't beat me up and then I'm still supposed to be like one to gravitate to you and run. Like, it doesn't work that way, because you got 2 humans.
I get that. But,
so how can I love on you if you're being mean to me?
But one of the realities is, and women need to understand this about men. A lot of the things that you tell us we need you to give us the action behind it to make sure that that's okay. Because a lot of times you'll tell us, tell me this, treat me this way, speak to me this way, tell me your true self and your true heart. And a lot of times we don't, because at the end of the day, a lot of times when we do that or we give you a piece of that, the reaction to that isn't a reaction of acceptance of what and who we truly are. And that's what we're looking for. And when we don't get that from you, the other 85, 90% that's available for you to know, I can't give it to you because you've shown me that if I give that to you, if I expose that to you, that I'm apt to receive rejection, ridicule, or some demeaning reaction that says, true indeed, you are my woman, you are my sounding block, you are my support, all of those other things. But the reality is, if I'm my true self to you, you ain't ready for that.
But I think you have to realize that we're two humans. So if you say something that is damaging to me, you can't have the expectation that the reaction is going to be perfect. Like maybe that person doesn't respond ideally at that. Maybe they need a minute to process it, and then hopefully they can come back and say, I apologize. If that was hurtful and I just reacted. You know what I'm saying? But you have to.
And although it's unfair, right? Although it's unfair, here's the reality. In 1950 whatever or 1960 whatever,
right?
And in 2019, the reality is what black men in particular have had to deal with from this society has put us in a fragile place where our woman is the only option and outlet that we have. And when we try to take advantage of using that particular outlet and it goes south, our natural reaction as men, black, white, red, yellow, whatever, our natural reaction as men is retreat.
And so and this is the thing, because we got to start wrapping this up. So
we ain't got to wrap up. No, we go long we want to. Well, I'm just trying. Go ahead.
So you're right. The thing that I wanted to say is that from a man's perspective, and I think that both of you kind of understand this, that we are the most vulnerable with the women that we love, right? And so when we get into a place where we come home and we show you, right, because we're not always that well in terms of explaining it, but we show you the things that break us down. Our expectation is that the nurturing comes out. When your kid falls down, you don't immediately, as a mom, you don't immediately say, well, I told you to get, a man would do that.
Right.
You go and grab the kid and check him and see what's going on, right? And I understand that that's a mother-kid kind of relationship, but there are times in society where we get broken down in a way, and we've been socialized in a way where we don't know how to externally get rid of some of these things. And so when we show you that vulnerability, sometimes, because we've seen you do it with other people, right? And so it's hard for us to take that thing and show, for us to take our heart out of our chest and put it in your hand, and you be like, you throw that thing to the ground and you're like, not today, nigga. I done had a rough day too. You figured out, right?
But that's the same thing she was saying. You're wanting that same thing. You're wanting her to show you compassion when you need it. And she's saying, I want you to do that for me too, because I'm watching you.
Right, but it was tougher to do. Yeah, it was tougher to do it in that time, right?
Sure.
But we're here. I'm not saying it's not a singular thing. I'm saying that, and this to some degree, I don't know, but basically women are not trained,
because
but you are natural nurturers.
You've accepted the role as nurturer.
Yeah, it is what you are, that thing. And then when you show it to people outside of this household, and you tell me you love me, and then your cousin come over and be like, oh, he hit me. And you like, baby, you want some wine? Let's talk about it. Let's get it out. And then I come home and be like, I can't stand my boss and blah, blah, blah. And you like, well, you still got to go to work and keep these lights on. You think the next time I'm going to share anything with you in terms of my, you know what I mean? And again, we're expecting a lot, right? And conversation comes into play. And it's a good segue into, as we wrap this up, in terms of what your next project is going to be in terms of helping solve some of these issues as it pertains to relationships and communication and connected human realities, I guess you can say.
Two things.
So, right.
Yeah, actually, it's two things.
So tell us a little bit about what you got going on.
The first thing that we're doing, and I've made the decision to make it a priority because it's important for me to have projects that include my wife, right? And that is, we had a show. We had a show.
You see what I'm saying?
We had a show a couple of years ago. I started it by myself because being the serial entrepreneur that I've been for years, I started it by myself. And then one day, I saw the value that I saw in my wife being relevant to what I was doing, right? And so that was a radio show that I was doing called the Build Real Relationship Show. And it was about and is about starting relationships on the premise that we're going to keep it real. Because going back to what we talked about before when we say women don't know what they want, I think that women know what they want. I think that we need to empower them to live in their moment and in their own self-perceived value for keeping it real. And so because they haven't been empowered to say, this is what I want, and I don't want nothing else other than what I said I wanted from you, that we need to create an environment where they feel empowered to claim that. And so I was doing the show and telling people what they should and shouldn't be doing or shouldn't be accepting. And so I started to pull Dana into it. And when I pulled Dana into it, just like my life in general, when we got married, my life exponentially grew. Right? Oh, my God.
That's sweet. Oh, my
Lord
life was already big before you came.
Lies you tell.
And so the whole idea of when a man findeth a wife, he findeth a good thing. I realized the benefit of having a wife and how, whether you call it God, whether you call it the universe, what have you, there were some blessings that came along with it. Because where I am today and where I was when I decided to get married is two distinctively different places. For instance, I was making $70,000 plus, $80,000 plus a year and eating ramen noodles. Okay. That being a reality for most people is like, how the hell was that happening? Okay. But you fast forward a year or two, and I'm in a 3,000 square foot house with a couple of cars, a couple of dogs, and I got money left over to do whatever I want to do. Realizing
that's because you know Don Juan and she tapped dance. Savion Club. But
realizing the benefit of having a pillar in your home to support what the home is all about. But during the Build Relationship Show, we said, you know what? Let's pull Dana in, and it became something more than what it was. Listenership went up. People's perception of what could happen based out of that concept went up.
So where can we find the Build Real Relationships?
So we're starting back this week.
Okay.
It's going to be everywhere. We're going to put it on Apple. We're going to put it on Stitcher and all the other available outlets. But we're bringing it back, not just as a podcast. When I have a radio network that we're making some changes at, because there's just some entrepreneurship things that I'm doing right now that are exposing me to some improvements and some things that I need to do to be better in business. And so we're bringing it back on the DMX Radio Network. It'll be part of the urbanprogressradio.com project, but we'll bring that along slow. But getting the podcast done, doing Facebook Lives and all will be on Monday. Yeah.
So next Wednesday, people can find
8 p.m.
Build Real Relationships.
Build Real Relationships.
Look for the Facebook page.
Yes.
And then the second thing.
The second thing is the 2-minute love affair.
Yes, sir.
And
yes, this is what y'all been waiting for. This is what y'all been waiting for. I promise.
The 2-minute love affair is based on a dance, but it's the dance of relationships and what our roles are in relationships and in a dance. And so the way that it's broken down is a dance lasts about 2.5, 3 minutes. But in that 2.5, 3 minutes, you can find all of the elements that are necessary to build and solidify a real relationship. And so if you're paying attention or if you're interested in building relationship, there are certain things that you need to be cognizant of and mindful of to move forward and to build something worthwhile, whether it be a relationship where y'all living together or a relationship where you're married. All of the different elements and dynamics that need to be in place are reflective from a dance.
That's a secret sauce thing. I am being 100% truthful with you.
Yeah,
I think that
it's crazy that I feel blessed. When I started dancing and started teaching, I didn't want to teach. I was a tips guy. I was like, if you want some tips, I'll give you some tips on dancing and what have you. And I had the pleasure of meeting an incredible individual who was one of the original Lindy Hoppers from the original big time Lindy Hoppers back in the day, out of Harlem, New York, by the name of Frankie Manning. And he was the one who exposed me to the whole idea.
They were that Renaissance shit again. I just want y'all to know. You see, you just dropping names. You know what I mean? Yeah, back in Malcolm X day. You know what I mean? That's what
Frankie Manning was that dude, and he was a beautiful spirit. I think he was 96 or 97 when he passed. And I met him, I want to say 4 years before he died. And he talked to me about the whole idea of dance and its reflection of what love could be, right? And what we needed to be paying attention to and looking at in relationships. And I took that to another level, and I was like, you know what? We can build the ideology of relationships out of this, right?
Fair enough.
And so I made adjustments in the way that I taught and the way that I perceived relationships and dance experiences. And it connected with people, you know, and so I've moving on.
I've taken a class. I had the pleasure of doing a date night class with Dave, me and my wife, and it was I must say, I mean, mind blowing would be selling the short. I think Dave has an awesome gift for teaching through the vehicle of dance, and so once this program goes live, which I think will happen in the coming months, and I'll keep you guys updated as to when that's coming, because I think every couple for sure should participate in some kind of way, because you will learn something.
Definitely. Absolutely
learn something from the messages that are taught in this class, and you will have a blast in terms of learning dance. You think of you think of Chicago stepping as this thing that's kind of, big suits, colorful suits, people moving their feet really fast. But when the way that Dave involves you and interacts is really, really special and makes you think about your relationship in a different way. So I'm excited that he's decided to put his lessons into a program to help build relationships in a way that will foster better relationships in the future. So I don't know if we have a date in which that will come. Again, I'll keep you guys posted on that. I'm playing a bit of his accountability partner. I'm on him about it because I think it's important. The better relationships we have, the better children we can have, and so forth and so on. So it's very powerful. So definitely be tapped into that. 2 Minute Love Affair has a Instagram page and a Facebook group as well. So check that out. There are a lot of good conversations going on on both of those platforms. So check those things out, and there'll be more coming soon from there. Dave and Dana, I definitely appreciate you guys coming through and having this conversation. There were a ton of things that I still wanted to talk about and talk through.
Part 2, 3, 4, 5, and we will have you on the Build Real Relationship.
Oh, I can't wait.
Build relationships.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna throw a bunch of shit in there. I can't wait. Bring me on. Let's go live. Let's go live. So again, appreciate you for joining. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the final chapter of this episode. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this episode. You can find a link in the episode notes. Simply tap or swipe up over the cover art. You will also see other affiliate links pertaining to books or products mentioned in this episode. Please support our show by checking out those links if you're interested. Those clicks will provide our show with a small commission if you decide to purchase. If you like what you're hearing, we would love for you guys to give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe. I'm your host, Terrell Lindsay, and until next time, be awesome.